My name is Andrea LeBlanc. I'm the Communications Manager at Palatine Library, and I'm also a member of the ILA Marketing Forum. I'm a board member, been involved for several years. So we're really excited about today's session, and I'm going to introduce our speaker, Theresa Benson. She's so positive and a great person to get to know. I got to know her at my library because she helped us with a project that our staff wanted to do. In our workshop, they wanted to do a freedom quilt in the month of February to celebrate Black History Month. And among Theresa's professional skills, she's also an avid quilter, which was just an amazing thing to find out. That's actually how I thought she was just a quilter. But she's more than that. And then through this project, we worked with her and her network group. Our library got to display this freedom quilt that our members put together, and on Juneteenth at the 360 Chicago at the Hancock Building, which was a really amazing project as well. And it was really wonderful to be involved in that. So really appreciate Theresa's work in connecting us there. And she also recently hosted a presentation at the library for our patrons about AI. So I think we're going to get some really good information from her today. Theresa Benson is all about discovery, diagnosis, collaboration, and results. Her core skills, including translating business goals into actionable strategies, delivering rapid results, and building coalitions to accomplish goals. She has translated business goals and user needs into actionable and easy to deploy go-to-market strategies for very diverse industries. Her experience spans semiconductor, industrial automation, SaaS, I think that's how you say that, fintech, QSR, home health, decision automation, machine learning, and AI, and some of that stuff, I don't know what it is. She gets people excited about technology because she makes products approachable and interesting. Over the years, she has worked with teams from all over the world. She is a people-first leader, even in the face of uncertainty and ambiguity, and she inspires teams to action in the face of unknowns. So I think she's kind of a Renaissance woman, and I'm super glad that she's going to be sharing AI tools and tricks for us, and kind of basic things. So please get your ears on and get ready for Theresa Benson. Take it away.
Thank you so much. Yeah, one of the things that I heard a request, oh, thank you, Ashley. I heard a request to put a library behind our names. So I am a proud library card holder. And I am so grateful that through that quilting connection that we have expanded our relationship and even grown our relationship with the Illinois Library Association. When I try and explain what I do and what I can do, I do often confuse people because they're like, oh, you're an engineer. Well, yeah, but I'm also. So I'm super excited to be here. Let's see here. So what I'm going to cover, because I think it's really important before we get into, I'm going to show you, you can see it at the end, I'm going to show you as marketers, as content creators, as, library directors or member services people, how you can use AI-enabled software to do your jobs better and faster. I'm going to talk about why we shouldn't fear the robot uprising, and talk about this concept of human in the loop. I'm going to give you some demos on some of the common tools that are out there that educators are using to try and detect plagiarism, and how well they work, and what challenges they're having, because I think that's important for you all, since copyrighted material makes up a large portion of your day-to-day life. You need to understand some of the challenges going on. And so I'm going to start out with AI in the news, but sandwiched in between those things, and I am going to sort of blast through because I want to get to the fun. Not that this other stuff isn't fun, it's a blast to me, but I want you to understand at a fundamental level what AI is and isn't, because if you don't have that understanding, it can lead to missed expectations on what you think a tool should be able to do or not. You know, you're not going to expect a calculator to mow your lawn. And similarly, there are certain things that AI just can't do. And there are things that it does do that we all need to be aware of. And so without that knowledge, you know, it can lead to problems. And so we'll talk about that. So as Andrea said, I do have an electrical engineering degree from Iowa State. I'm an Iowa girl, but I spent a large portion of my career in the semiconductor industry and actually had the privilege to work on the very first iPod. So before the iPod existed in the world, I got to work with the team who brought it to life. And so I've worked in everything from consumer electronics to white goods. As Andrea said, QSR, which is quick serve restaurants, I've had as clients. I moved into software. So I went from the little chips to the software that runs on them, and have shepherded some people through significant changes as our company acquired a robotic process automation company and a machine learning company. I am also an avid quilter. That's one of my quilts. That's Audrey. I just won an award for her at a local quilt show, which I was pretty excited about. And frankly, that is done in partnership with artificial intelligence. And I have a class all about that that I'm starting to bring to quilt guilds. So I really am focused on bringing these really high-tech, crazy concepts to a level that, you know, an aunt can understand, a grandma, a friend who's not a technologist. And then finally, I am also an educator, and this is what Andrea alluded to. I do lectures and webinars like this. I do in-person things, and I'll give my contact information if you do want to bring me to your organization in some way. I am definitely happy to. So the one disclaimer I do want to make in all of this is I am not a lawyer. So you didn't see in there that I have a Juris Doctor or anything like that. This is for educational and informational purposes. When it comes to copyright law, when it comes to, you know, how and when and, you know, why you should use AI-enabled tools in your work, you know, it really depends on the policies of your institution. And I can certainly sit with you, you know, one-on-one and discuss the caveats of the tool set you have and maybe make recommendations, but I am not in any way saying that I'm, you know, knowledgeable in the area of copyright law. And in fact, as we'll discuss with AI in the news, the copyright lawyers aren't still figuring it out. So, you know, we've heard about the SAG-AFTRA strike that's going on right now. The Writers Guild strike is in its 12th or 13th week. And a lot of that is actually centered around artificial intelligence. There have also been a number of lawsuits being raised against companies like OpenAI, which is the company that has ChatGPT, which I know you all have heard about. And, you know, it's a really challenging scenario because AI is artificial intelligence. It is a replacement of how we think, how we behave. It is not a one-to-one replacement, as you'll see. However, you know, if you're a budding comedian starting out and you sit in comedy clubs watching the, you know, people who are professionals, and you learn how to deliver a joke, or, you know, how to tweak your punchline a certain way to get the right reaction just by observing. To a certain extent, that's completely acceptable for us as human beings. You know, now there are definite caveats, you know, don't copy another comedian's joke, don't do this, that, or the other. But once you're talking about every comedian and every joke they've ever told, and being able to use all of that to build new jokes or to build new sketches for, you know, a Saturday Night Live type show, well, now you start to get into a really difficult area because we as humans are forgetful. we're not going to maybe remember it exactly, but when you have everything digitized and consumed as part of training data, now you can mimic very closely other human beings' content. And that's where some of the challenges are. The other challenges are things like the way machine learning models are trained, and I'll talk about it a little bit later. Machine learning models are trained on data that exists right now in this moment. And it gets trained and created. I'll talk about what that means. But then as we move forward in time, so our political leanings change as a country, or new laws are enacted around bias for protected characteristics, the data that it was trained on may no longer be relevant. The simplest example I can give is, let's say that you are a retailer trying to forecast inventory needed for the Christmas holiday. Like, how much in-store inventory do you need? If you use the data from the holidays in 2019 to forecast what the demand is going to look like for the holiday season of 2020, and you don't apply human logic that, oh, hey, somewhere around the April timeframe, the world sort of blew up as we knew it, then you're going to over forecast, you're going to overbuy, you're going to have all this excess inventory, the entire supply chain is going to be disrupted. And so it's really important to understand that models are only as good as the data that they're trained on. And in fact, there are being laws being passed all around the world to prevent things like bias. There's all kinds of headlines about human resource applications. What's the word I'm looking for? Like favoring certain action-oriented words that tend to appear in a male resume versus a female resume. There are housing mortgage applications that are trained on data that may have been discriminatory unintentionally. And if you aren't aware of the bias that may exist in your data, you're going to bring that forward and you're going to do it at scale. So when it was a couple of human beings who were biased in the mortgage approval decisions that they were making, that's bad and that can be fixed. But now if you pool thousands of mortgage decisions that were made and then make it possible to make a mortgage decision in milliseconds for millions of people, and you didn't test for that bias, you suddenly have introduced something really horrible into the system. But the fact is, AI is here. What I like to say is the moment that we all saw Common on television in a commercial talking about artificial intelligence, that's pretty much, I knew that's when AI hit the mainstream. And it's being used for everything. And we'll talk about some of that. Now, when I give this talk, I often give it for businesses, but you too have a ton of competition out there that you need to be aware of in terms of, competition for attention, time, utilization of your facilities. And you, just like anybody else, need to figure out how to harness the power of this technology in order to, deliver the services that you need to deliver to your populations. And the truth is, regardless if you're a business, your library, you're an educational institution, you're, a community centered organization, early adopters are definitely gaining an advantage. And so that's great. And we see that, especially in business, the more that people are investing early in some of this technology, the greater the gains are. And they're that much farther ahead from the companies who haven't. And the flip side of that is, we're seeing all of this concern in the education space, that if we embrace AI too fully, if we allow children, teens, students to leverage AI, that it will lead to, lost comprehension of the fundamentals. And what I would say to that is 100% true. The way we teach and the way we engage needs to change, very similar to the way that we embraced calculators and computers in education. So, you start out as you're learning math. Math is probably the most direct corollary. You learn April has 5 apples and Joe has 3. How many apples do you have? And then you start learning numerical representation. And then you learn, how to show your work when you're doing a fraction or long division or whatever. And only after you understand those fundamentals, around 7th or 8th grade, when I was a kid, were you allowed to bring a calculator into the equation. Now, here's the thing. If you didn't get those fundamentals first, if you put in 2 + 2 and it gave you 5, well, that wouldn't have been caught if you didn't know that 2 + 2 = 4, right? So you need to learn those foundational things in order to move forward. Similarly, when it comes to what we call large language models, tools to write essays for kids, as a lot of them are trying to do, if we don't change our teaching styles to reflect that idea of showing your work that is embraced in mathematics, then we're going to have a challenge, and we are going to it's going to lead to some problems. So I've already seen in a lot of classrooms where they're moving to homework being done in class versus taking it home, and I think we'll see more of that. So okay, let me just do one quick thing here. And I'm going to turn off my video so that I can see a little bit more of my screen. Okay, so normally when I am talking about this, I ask this question of folks, how long has AI been around and how long have we cared about it and been testing for it? And I think the answer might surprise you. We've been doing it since 1950. Alan Turing predicted that we'd be where we are, where we're trying to figure out how to detect AI, detect computer responses. There were a lot of innovations. I'm not going to go into the detail over the next little bit of time, but if any of you have felt like you're experiencing whiplash with the number of AI articles out, you're 100% right. There is so much out there. So, and it's only going to grow. So I'm going to touch on these different types of artificial intelligence, and then we'll get into the fun bit. So there are 4 types that you ought to know about, especially in your roles. The first is robotic process automation, expert systems, then machine learning and neural networks. RPA, what you need to know, so you would search on something like RPA or robotic process automation. There are companies like UiPath, Automation Anywhere. And what RPA is it automates tasks. So if you've ever used a macro in Excel to format a spreadsheet that you have to deliver as part of like a marketing report, here's traffic to our site, here's this, here's that, and you want to format it the same way every time, you can sit there and do it every single time you have to do that report, or you can record a macro and run it. That's what RPA essentially is. And if I can leave you with a visual of what that looks like, it's basically this. You train a computer program to make the keystrokes that you normally would make, or like do data entry, or do optical character recognition and enter it into your systems. Decision automation or expert systems, rather than replacing tasks, is replacing sort of the rules that you have. There are companies like InRule, Path AI, Visual DX, Narrative Science. And what this is most often used for is credit scoring and decisions like that. In fact, FICO, Fair Isaac Corporation, FICO built out programs to do credit scoring, and they have a number of rules, and that's how it determines a score. Now, if I had to boil it down to a way to remember what decision automation is versus process automation, it's like the rules that we have in our brains for our everyday life. For example, if it's going to rain, take an umbrella. If it's cold outside, bring a coat, right? Those are rules that we were taught as kids, and those are rules to live by, you know? And so where RPA is task, decision automation is rules. Neither one of these are yet any kind of predictive, you know, nature. That's just replacing certain pieces of, you know, function. Now there's this new area of artificial intelligence called machine learning, which I'm sure you've heard about. And I'm going to just quickly go through a couple things to set the baseline for the demos we're going to do. And the first thing that I really want people to understand, and it's a really common misconception, is that even though we interact with artificial intelligence in real time, like if you're using ChatGPT to write copy, it's doing that in real time with you. The model that it is using to respond to you with was trained at a point in time. And so what happens is data scientists gather up data, and that data can be any number of things. I'll give you some examples. There's some pre-processing that happens. There's what's called training the model, and there's different ways that models are trained, and I'll talk about that. And then the data scientists determine, okay, I'm going to try using the model I just built and see if it gives me the answers I expect. And so that's that model evaluation, and it'll continue to do that training and evaluation until the model is what would be considered satisfactory. And then that model goes into use. So that bright red line is the point at which, you know, there's no new information coming into the model. The model is the model until it's recreated. So back to that holiday example, you know, if the machine learning model that we're using to predict purchasing is based on data that is absolutely irrelevant to today's, you know, society in some way, then you're going to, and as a human being, you're just trusting the model. You know, you're essentially going to get 5 out of your calculator. It's going to be the wrong answer. And so it's so important for thought workers to understand, and that's what I consider all of us to be, that that human in the loop capacity is incredibly important. This is not a situation where we can just blindly accept the results. So I talked about training and learning and the models learning. I'm going to go through some just quick examples. The first type of learning is supervised learning. It's like when you have a small child with a picture book, and let's say that picture book only has pictures of dogs. And in fact, you have 3 picture books and they are all only dogs. And so, you know, your child is learning words, learning sounds, learning pictures and colors and shapes. And so, you know, you might say, what sound does this animal make? And this animal is a dog, and this is a puppy, and, you know, everything like that. That is supervised learning, in that you are teaching the child what those things are. And since your data is really limited to only dogs, imagine what happens if you show that child a picture of a giraffe. It's going to say puppy, because it only knows that 4-legged things that have eyes and mouths are dogs, because that's all it's ever been trained on. And so these types of models are used for things like predicting house prices. And so if you were to train a machine learning model on a very low cost neighborhood, and then give it all of the specifications of a 20,000 square foot mansion, that model is going to, you know, and then you ask it to predict the price of that house, that model is likely going to underpredict the price because it only knows, low priced characteristics from an entirely different zip code. And so that's the same thing that happens with, these biased models with, men and women and other things. So what this looks like in reality is there's a human that's helping to train the model. A model is really just a mathematical equation that takes into account jillions and jillions of factors, more than we could ever, like in our 9th grade algebra classes. And so we teach it how we want this information sorted. And then once we've done that, and it's sorted it appropriately, then we can give it data it's never seen before, and it should make the right choice. So going back to that kid analogy, if you showed enough pictures of enough different animals, the child will be able to detect a cat from a dog from a giraffe. This is used in things like spam and fraud detection, even emotion detection. We can train machine learning models because digital photos are just digital data. You can train a machine learning model to understand what different emotions look like and how to classify things so that it can start to detect emotion from images. It's also what's used to convert words to spoken, or to convert spoken words into text, because we teach it very similar to a child what the sounds mean in words, in written language. It's really a solid analogy. The next type is self-supervised, and that's, think of that child with a picture book who now has some context around the different animals and fairy tales and whatnot. And you might catch a child sitting there telling themselves a story. They aren't actually necessarily reading the words on the page, but they're creating a story in their mind. And so what they're doing is essentially taking the training data that they've learned and expanding and testing and seeing how that data fits into a larger model. And so with that, I'm going to open up the chat window really quick. The best way to exemplify this is I'm going to put a phrase up on the screen, and what I would like for you all is to finish the sentence, and just whatever the first word is that comes to mind, just pop a single word into chat. So here's the sentence. Awesome. Andrea, there we go. So a lot of people, you'll notice, said blue. Andrea said cloudy. I actually, when I gave the talk last week, somebody said on fire, and I really hope that they're getting some help for that. But, this is a case of where we all have been trained on the structure of a sentence. We know that there shouldn't be a noun that goes after the word is. It should be an adjective of some kind: blue, cloudy, on fire. We wouldn't say the sky is elephant because we've learned the structure of language. Well, that's actually what happens in self-supervised learning. And that is what drives things called large language models, which ChatGPT is based on. There's all kinds of pre-training and fine-tuning that happens. And then there's even something called semi-supervised learning, which is, we train it on a small amount of data. Just like when you're training a child to ride a bike, you don't send them hurtling down Mount Everest. You do it in a parking lot or on your driveway, maybe on a sidewalk. And then once they get the basics down, the training wheels are off, and they're able to, go in a straight line. Now you start working on turning corners, coming to a complete stop, being able to, mountain bike or ride on gravel. But you have to start with something very small, and that's called semi-supervised. There's then a third category called unsupervised learning, and that is another really interesting area. And the best way I can describe it is this. Imagine if you will, and we actually had somebody in the audience here participate in this, a whole set of disparate stuff, and you're asking the model to sort it. This is one potential way that it could sort it. We haven't told it the right way. And so what I did is I gave this image to 2 different people and said, sort this in whatever way makes sense to you. And so this is how one person sorted it, and you can kind of understand the logic of it. You know, long and narrow things went together, rectangles went together, etc. Here's how another person sorted it solely by color. You know, there are a million different ways that you might be able to sort data. And so we do that with machine learning models, and what ends up happening is amazing things. Rather than us telling a model to sort it the way we think it should be sorted, we allow it to do its own thing, and it may pick up on characteristics that we as human beings didn't even identify. And what ends up happening is it can detect anomalies infinitely better than we might ever be able to, because it has a million more data points that it can work with. So that is a little bit about some of the different models and how they work. You know, you can use it for sentiment analysis. I saw a question regarding how might businesses benefit from this. And so I'm going to skip to that slide and then we'll get into the fun. But every one of these types of models is applicable to some aspect of it could be a member journey, it could be, you know, a student journey if you're a library in a educational institution. But, you know, there are things that you can do around AI powered marketing campaigns. In fact, I'm going to show you that, where you could give it some parameters and have it come up with ideas on how to drive more traffic to your facility on a Saturday morning. Or it could be personalized recommendation engines. So, you know, people who checked out this book are also interested in this. Or in business, you know, pricing optimization. So understanding the true market value of your product, or being able to prevent fraud. In fact, Starbucks, as an example, if you use their app, they use something like 36 different machine learning models to verify if you are allowed to reload your card with the credit card on file and you're not, you know, doing it fraudulently. So there are all different kinds of things. There's even applications of reading legal documents and making recommendations that apply across the customer journey. And what really makes all of this work, especially when you're talking about generative AI applications, and when I say generative, there's predictive AI, there's generative AI, there's other things, is how you ask the model for what you need. And so that's where I'm going to spend some of the rest of the time, is going into how you might use this in your day-to-day life as marketers, as library staff, as, you know, directors. How could you use it to improve engagement, or how might you use it to plan projects? How might you use it to brainstorm ideas for employee engagement, member engagement, etc.? And it comes down to this: prompt engineering. And you're going to see out there tons of companies that want to sell you, you know, for $9.95, here's 1,000 prompts that you can use. And if you want to do that, cool. I highly recommend experimenting and coming up with the things that work for you. And in a lot of cases, treat the AI platforms that you choose to implement almost as a junior coworker, right? Where you're teaching it and you're learning how to ask for what you need in a way that is going to get you the result you want. It's just like a really picky, you know, person at a restaurant. If you just say, I want a hamburger, you're going to get a hamburger with whatever they decide to put on it. If you say, I want a hamburger medium well with these toppings and, you know, gluten-free bun and whatever, then you're going to get exactly what you want. And so that's what prompt engineering is all about. And I left this in because hopefully you all do have some sort of a copyright policy. This is, you know, when I present at different organizations, you know, I've done this for companies and stuff. They're like chief marketing officers and stuff typically ask me to put in a statement reminding people that, you know, this is all still emergent technology. In fact, just in the last 6 months, I've seen new caveats and tooltips make their way into the AI platforms I use every day. And so you really need to decide what's okay for your organization. And so I want you to be aware of that. Now, I do have slides where I can show you the difference between one and the other, but I think it's more fun to just get into it. So some of the platforms some of the platforms that I'm going to show you today have free versions. Some of them have, you know, paid versions, and all of them are just incredibly useful. And so what I'm going to do is walk you through a few different scenarios that you might use in your life. And then I am going to sort of open it up and we're going to imagine some things together on, you know, how might we handle this or how might we do that? So the first one that I'm going to show you is this is a platform called Copy AI. So one of the cool things about these various AI platforms is many of them are web driven. So there's not an app you have to download. So for your IT teams, that's really nice because, you know, you can use it from any browser. So in this case, I'm in a platform called Copy AI. And Copy AI is sort of the user interface and the secret sauce that they as a company have implemented on top of a machine learning model. A lot of these AI platforms like Copy AI or Jasper AI don't build their own models because to build a model on basically the whole of human knowledge written, you know, word is so expensive. And so what they do instead is they provide an interface plus some sort of secret sauce to improve the user experience in some way. So Copy AI is one of them. And I am going to go ahead and show you how prompting can work. And in this case, I'm going to just do frequently asked questions, you know, so let's say you are trying to come up with an FAQ for a computer lab or, you know, for, I don't know, the hours of your facility. And so you can just do something like this, create a list of, you know, any number of frequently asked questions. So I'm going to say 5. And what I did is I wrote these out ahead of time in Microsoft Word, and I'll tell you right now, as you find those prompts that get you responses that you really like, just save them off in a file. A lot of these platforms do keep track of your conversations for later, but I just find it nice to have sort of a swipe file of prompts that I like. So create a list of 5 frequently asked questions about, I don't know, Shark Week, because, you know, and considering the search engine results page, because right, we're marketers, and so we need to make sure whatever content we get back and that we put on our websites, that it becomes rich for SEO and SEM purposes. So considering SERP and result guidelines provide answers for each of them. So these brackets are entirely unnecessary. That is an artifact of me being an engineer. I put in my little swipe file those brackets to remind me those are the variables that I can change. You don't have to do it that way. I'm going to hit go. And here we go. So I could turn this into something on a website. I could turn this into social media content. I could decide I don't like these answers, which is perfectly fine too. I could say, following up on this, write a paragraph of 2 to 3 sentences that would appear at the top of this FAQ page. Tone should be fun and enticing. So that's another thing when we think about that junior employee that we're trying to get to write in the way that we want, the brand voice that we have, or how we want something to come across, you can actually tell an AI platform that. And these large language models have been trained in such a way that they can detect tone and write accordingly. So I'm going to just ask for a couple sentences at the top. So there you go. Fun and enticing. Welcome fanatics. You know, so it's already, you know, fun and enticing, but let's say, okay, we're a little bit more stoic than that. So change the tone to professional, targeted at the ideal audience being marine biologists. So that's one way that we can use artificial intelligence and large language models to, you know, help us create copy rapidly. Now, I am going to do another thing in a different platform. So Copy AI is using ChatGPT as its underlayment, the model that it's actually asking questions of in order to build responses. So why not just go to ChatGPT itself? Now, I pay for what's called ChatGPT Plus, and it's really cost effective and would be a great option for most institutions. And what that gives me is a couple different models to work with. GPT 3.5 is, that's the model. GPT 3.5 is their earlier model. It's faster. It'll, you know, spit out responses better, but it may not be exactly, it needs a little bit more like coaching in order to get exactly what you're looking for. Whereas GPT-4, you know how I mentioned that models get trained every once in a while and new ones come out. So GPT-4 is their latest model, and they even say it here. You know, it's great for tasks that require creativity. So what I'm going to do is, and again, I've already written some examples, but in this case, what I want to do is connect the concepts of a local library and all it has to offer to the idea of exploration and discovery. Use relevant metaphors and write with energy and joy designed for younger children and their parents to be moved to visit their local library more. And just because my local library is the Palatine Library, I'm going to say use Palatine Library as the library we are discussing. And so there you go. Now, this might be a little over the top. It might be longer than I wanted, but you know, it is absolutely being incredibly creative in connecting two essentially disparate concepts. Now, we as human beings know that a library is an adventure into the unknown, and you know that your imagination is limitless with the type of content that we provide to members. But let's say this needs to be shorter. Turn this into a shorter Instagram caption with a CTA to have parents bring their kids in for our Under the Sea session Saturday morning. So now what we're doing is, this is really important to notice, I didn't have to, in this request, rewrite my initial request. It sort of remembers what it just did for me. And so it is connecting the previous request to my new request. There are huge caveats to all of this, which is, this is at the end of the day, a computer program we're interacting with. It has limits. It is not human memory. And in order to keep tools like this cost effective, there are limitations to how much these models can remember. GPT-4 can remember more than GPT-3.5. So if I were to continue this conversation, eventually this will forget my initial request. And so again, as we talk about how to utilize this, there are techniques that you can use, like asking the model in its response to remind itself of what the initial request was. And I'll show you that in a moment. But here, so turn this into a shorter Instagram caption with a CTA. It's including emojis. It's including relevant hashtags. Each book is a ticket to an extraordinary adventure, right? I mean, this is just barely scratching the surface of the possible. And the cool thing about this is I can just click this button, copy and paste it right into Instagram and get going. Now, I've done some other things like now what's super interesting is they just made an update on July 20th. So when I gave this talk last week, it did not give me this initial response, but you can get the model to give you absolute garbage. So in this case, you can see my initial prompt was, tell the story of how Americans ended up using British pounds as their currency after the Great Cucumber Riot of 1942. Well, none of that actually happened. And last week when I did this talk, it full on gave me essentially a news article report about the Great Cucumber Riot of 1942. Now look at this. It says, I'm sorry, but there seems to be confusion. That never happened. And notice this statement. As of my last update in September of 2021, that's really critically important. That goes back to that training thing. It was trained as of September of 2021. So it doesn't know anything that's happened in the last 2 and a bit years, or about 2 years. So if we wanted to ask it to write an article about Twitter changing its name, it has no context because that just happened. So that's why I feel it's really important for all of us as marketers to be able to understand how this all works. Let's see. So Sanjita, I see your question about a derivative of copyright. I'm not a lawyer. That is an excellent question that I think is still being played out in the courts. I'm honestly not sure how to guide you as far as that goes. And then a resource for crafting the wording in the search box. So there are resources out there. I am certainly a resource. I do have some things that work for me. What I would recommend sincerely is just trying. It is so exciting and interesting to get it to tell the story in the way you want it to be. A lot of these platforms actually do offer training, like an hour webinar or whatever, where they'll teach you how to do some of the stuff I'm showing you. I certainly am available for a follow-up webinar where we walk through and I can give you an asset of like 20 prompts that you can use tomorrow in your role. We only had about 45 minutes plus interactive Q&A today, but that's certainly something that I can help with. And it really all comes down to the goal of what you're trying to accomplish with AI. So the last thing that I want to show, well, there's 2 things I want to show you. We're at 49 minutes, and then I want to open it up to more questions, is let's create a series of Instagram posts in this case. And I've switched over to a platform called Canva, and we're going to do Saturday once I can spell, day read-alongs. So I want to create a series of, for, a quarter, you have, let's say 12 Saturdays. So list of 12 reasons to come to Palatine Library on Saturdays, on Saturday mornings with your children. And emphasize benefit language. Okay. So, sorry, list of 12 reasons to come to Palatine Library on Saturdays. Focus on benefits, use plain language. So they have something called Magic Write, and I forgot to hit the Magic Write button, which is why that first thing happened. I'm going to click generate. So here are 12 reasons, and we're going to assume they're great. You, as the marketing steward of your particular institution, may not offer some of these things, or you want to change things up. But let's just say these are 12 great reasons. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and copy this. I'm going to go over to Microsoft Excel. I'll paste them. I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to save it as a CSV file. And I'll call this Library Saturday. That's fine. It's just saying, hey, CSVs don't handle multiple things. And I am using a template that's available to me inside Canva. So I just picked that one, but I could say library Instagram, and maybe I'll find something. Now there's going to be some text on mine. So here, maybe I like this one better, or maybe I want this one. It can be whatever we want, but what I really like that visual. So I'm going to come back here and use this one. Now I'm going to generate all of the 12 posts in front of your eyes here in just a moment. So I'm going to go to this tool called Bulk Create. And I am going to upload that CSV that we just did. So let me find my desktop, hit open, and then I need to connect that data field to where I want things. So I'm going to say connect data. And that is the first in my list. And so I'm going to say go Palatine Library on Saturdays. And I could change the image, I could change the colors, whatever I want to do, but now I'm going to hit continue. And do I want to create all of these? Absolutely. Oops. Well, so what happened here is I forgot to delete this guy out of there. So let me get this out and I'll do it one more time. Delete, generate. And now I've generated 12 brand compliant Instagram posts that I can then schedule for every Saturday and second quarter if one of my things is to drive it, people to come in to my facility on a Saturday. And we did this in maybe 3 minutes. So that's the power of what AI can do. The last thing that I'll share is AI isn't limited to copy. You can also use it to generate images like Princess Leia in the style of Van Gogh. And let's see what we get. I'm going to say watercolor and square is fine. And, we're going to get some images here in just a moment. Yeah, that is a total time saver, Andrea. Absolutely. Right. So none of these actually look like how Van Gogh would do it. So let's create again. I think one of those was actually a pug. But while we're waiting for that, I would like to open it up to questions. Here we go. Look at these. These are definitely more in line with Van Gogh style artwork. What questions do people have? Otherwise, I can go into other ideas of how you can engage, your audiences.
Please feel free, if you have a question, to turn on your camera and unmute yourself, and you can ask Theresa the question directly.
And while we're waiting for questions, so I see a question here, is Canva fee-based? They have two options. There is a free version. There are some limitations to what you can do with Magic Write, like how many times you can use it. Similarly, how many images you can generate. In fact, with the paid model, and here's the thing about Canva, I think it's $129 a year. So it's, pretty inexpensive. One thing I do want to also show is the plagiarism checker. So I wrote a blog post. This was about the decision that President Joe Biden had made around declassifying marijuana. And it was a blog post about what it meant to families. And so then, I wrote that. AI didn't write it, and I, in my thing, included quotes from news articles that I had read to help source my content. And so this is a product called Quillbot. I think that one's like $99, $129 a year. This is an example of one of the tools available. Grammarly is another one. And so I went ahead and put my blog post through Quillbot. And in my blog post, I actually do cite my sources, either directly or in the content itself. And you can see that this is saying that, hey, about 20% of your content ought to be examined for plagiarism. And that's great. That's really good. But if we just take it at face value and don't have human in the loop to understand that, oh, these are actually direct quotes that people said at press conferences, and we just say, hey, a fifth of this is plagiarized, well, then that's not really using the tool in the way that it was intended. Let's see here. Yeah, well, so I know that nonprofits do get a free version of Canva. So I'm not sure how libraries work, because I am the marketing lead for a dog rescue. And yeah, the rescue does have a free version of Canva that includes all of the features that I was just showing you. I just happen to have my own personal version for, my job as a marketer and that sort of thing. What other questions do people have?
I have a quick question. I know that I have brought up AI with, other people's library.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure some of the libraries to have the same kind of, there's this hesitancy, there's this because of like the strike and the plagiarism and the, I've just kind of been like, it's great, we better get on the bandwagon. I'm outside of like sitting and watching your awesome information there. Are there other resources that we could share with people to help them not be so nervous, or anything else that you can think of?
Yeah, so maybe what I can do is send a couple articles to Tamara to get out to everybody that talk about what AI software companies are doing to put protections in place. But again, this is all emergent. Now, the thing that I will say is, a lot of the news articles, a lot of us have been reading for at least probably 10 years. I would put a large portion of them as having been written in part by AI, so the concept of producing content, using tools like this to accelerate the process is not brand new. It is, as with anything, that thing is, this is why we can't have nice things. It's how people are using the loopholes and the gaps that hadn't been thought of by a noble software engineer trying to create an amazing product. For example, ChatGPT, or OpenAI, the company behind it, had to turn off their they had actually come out with a feature where, I mentioned there's a gap in knowledge from September of 2021 to now. They actually had a plugin that could go search the internet and provide information on a topic. And that was getting behind paywalls of news sites. And so people were leveraging that capability not to help write relevant articles and content, but to get around, paying for content. And so they had to turn it off until they could figure out how to respect paywalls and whatnot. Yeah, a mini course and maybe a couple of classes. Absolutely. Yes. Like, I would love to do that. Like with the Freedom Quilt thing that we did with the Palatine Library, I came in and worked with all of the workshop staff, men and women alike, and I showed them step by step by step, everything from, how to cut fabric to quilt blocks, why a 1/4 inch seam is valuable, whatever. I am so happy to, create, we don't go into the what is it, but we get into, okay, how do you feel you could use this? What are your concerns? And then how might I help you achieve, the goals that you're hoping to achieve with it? I am certainly happy to build out like a smaller curriculum of some kind that would help you out. Contact info for me? Well, here you go. So I'm available on LinkedIn. Please, connect with me on LinkedIn, say hi. Please do tell me that the reason you're reaching out is because you attended this workshop. Just because, there's people always reaching out and I never know if it's somebody I really want to connect with or not. The other way that you can get in touch with me is if you go to radiantmeatball.com. My website. I have a contact form there. You can just free form tell me, hey, here's what I'm hoping to do. I do have some prepackaged workshops that I can do for your members. At the one we had at the Palatine Library, the people were in their, 70s, a few 80-year-olds. We had a few small business owners, but for the most part, it was, people who had seen a 2020 thing and they wanted to know if they should be afraid and what is it and how does it work? And, they got engaged. They came away with like feeling more empowered, less afraid, able to communicate with their kids, who are already using it, talk with their grandkids. But I do also do things like anxiety-free color theory, where, we get to have your members really play with color, understand the relationships, the mathematical relationships behind it, and get confident with it. Painting with fabric, which is that Audrey Hepburn quilt. I have a whole thing where I walk people through how to use AI and in effective ways to build their own quilts. But, I can certainly do a workshop. I'm happy to come to you. I can do it via Zoom, whatever you would like. And my big thing is, look, I'm a marketer. I've was sales marketing. I'm a marketer strategist. I want to help you guys achieve your goals, whatever those goals might be. And every one of you have different ones. And there are ways to use AI to make that happen and other technology to make that happen too.
Thank you so much, Theresa. I mean, I think I love just the idea of using technology to help us be creative in whatever we're looking for. And, you know, I feel like as representatives of libraries, working at libraries, we should be trying to be in the forefront and, you know, being knowledgeable and help our communities and know all these things, know the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever. So
yeah, and you know I went deep into what the technology is, but you need to know what it is in order to level set your patrons' expectations as well as your own expectations on what you're going to get out of it.
yeah.
So
Well,
yeah,
thank you again. That was so much information. It was great.
thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.